Welcome everyone to On the Record, hosted by Dekel and presented by SHURE in association with Rope. My name is Louis Marks. I'm here at the Rope Room just outside the great city of Philadelphia. If you're new to this show, each week guitarist Dekel sits down with some of the best engineers, producers, mixers on the planet, and they chop it up about technique, inspiration, and life in general. I want to take a moment to thank Shore for giving us the platform here to reach everyone, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Our guest today is engineer and producer Vaughan Merrick. His credits: 2 Grammys on the shelf from his work with Amy Winehouse on the Back to Black record, Grammy nomination as the engineer for Jason Mraz's Mr. A to Z, and he's worked with so many people, but I'll just name a few. And I was interested in the diversity here: Santigold, Depeche Mode, Lily Allen, Jesse Harrison, Nora Jones, The Killers, and of course many more. You can find him on Twitter at Vaughan Merrick. We'll put that in the comments. Dekel has performed with jazz legends Johnny Griffin, Pat Martino, Billy Hart, and many, many more. His recent release, Let Love Rule, was out here on Rope in 2020. You can find that at dekelbor.bandcamp.com. And I want to remind you that Speak in My Piece is another show that Dekel is hosting, talking with some of the finest musicians on the planet. And that's on Jazz Times every Thursday at 3 p.m. So thank you for tuning in. I'm going to switch over now. We're going to visit with Dekel in Berlin and Vaughan Merrick in New York.
All right. We're doing this. I've been waiting for this episode for a while. We've been emailing for so long.
Yeah.
Trying to get in touch, and me basically trying to steal as much wisdom from you as I possibly can. So the reason for this series is very simple. We just released an album. It's doing incredibly well. It's been shortlisted for a Grammy in some categories. We're super excited about it, but I'm working on a new one. And Vaughn, I'm trying to get better. And I'm hoping you can help me do that. So I
Let's
have a
do
lot
it.
of questions. But first and foremost, how you guys doing? Everybody's safe? Everybody's well?
Yeah, I think so. New York has been, we had that early first surge, and I think New Yorkers are very good about, cooperating. I think, we've had, obviously 9/11, blackouts, and usually it's like, you think of New York as being this horrible, dangerous place. But in reality, it's like New Yorkers are generally like really great about, oh, what do we got to do? And then they just hunker down and get it done. So things seem to be pretty good here.
Well, we were supposed to move back to New York in April. I mean, right as the pandemic hit. I was there 2001 to 2008, and I really missed the vibe. I think I need some New York in my veins.
Yeah,
as they say. So with all this time on your hands, a couple of albums that you've been listening to that inspired you can share?
Oh, names are going to escape me for the moment. There's been a lot of stuff. Actually, what I've been really interested in is the emerging British jazz scene.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool, seeing that come out of, I guess it's probably been bubbling for a while, but just seeing that energy, I was, before we went on camera, I was talking about this sort of emergent thing that's happening with all this music kind of bubbling up on YouTube and stuff. And it seems like, despite the fact that all the majors are pushing all this heavily sequenced music and electronic music, there's this like real kind of yearning for like the real thing.
So that's why I called you. To be honest, I always felt that your work has, I feel you have a sound to your thing. There's something very, I don't want to say natural, but it's very, I always feel the instruments in a room. I always feel that it's actual instruments. I can hear the nuances of the vocals. It's just a very real sound. I don't want to say, it's almost as if someone who grew up on classical and jazz and then went current, or I don't want to say
Yeah.
that. That's
Well,
really
it's actually quite true because I grew up on primarily like classical music, a little bit of jazz, but more classical music.
wait,
And
wait, wait,
then,
wait, wait, wait. You're running away from me. What? Give me the details. What does that mean to grow up on classical music for you?
well, so my mother's father, he was a vocal teacher, and he taught vocal or taught singers, Broadway singers here in New York. And
So you're a
so,
third generation New Yorker?
well, what? That's a whole long story. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, actually, and then I came
Oh,
back to New
nice.
York. So, but I
Ah.
was born upstate, and then I grew up out there, and I came back.
I have a question. The saying you're from Portland just became super cool in the last 10 years because of the TV series. Is it a whole new thing? I mean, it was like, oh, Portland.
Maybe.
All right.
Well, Portland's like a weird thing. It's funny because my mother, when that first went on the air, my mother called me and she was like, "Have you seen this show? It makes this place look awful." And I hadn't seen it before. And then I watched it and I called her back and I said, "I don't see what's wrong with it. This isn't a comedy. It's a reality show."
Completely. But I also think that it makes Portland seem like the coolest place on earth. I mean, it's like the new San Francisco or something. Like to me, that would make me want to move to Portland.
Yeah, it is actually really cool. And you know, it's a really interesting place. I left there primarily because I couldn't handle how much it rained out there. But it is.
Let's not go there.
Geographically, it's beautiful, and you know, because the first third of the state is like very wet because the rain comes in from the ocean. It gets captured by the mountain range, and then east of that, it's all desert. So you get this like super diverse like ecosystem, and it's just miraculous place.
Let's do this. Let's do this conversation. We won't even talk about music. I don't know if you noticed, but Oregon has amazing trees. I mean, a lot of like cholla wood, a lot of guitar wood that comes from Oregon.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I mean, obviously, lumber is a huge industry there. The whole Northwest, you know, going from Oregon all the way up into Canada.
And that's because of, geographically speaking, you know, as construction methods, we're talking about like 200 years ago, right? It goes that far back.
I guess, I mean, I would say that that part of the country,
around.
Yeah, it's, you know, that part of the country is like a relatively recent part of the country. So I think, you know, it's interesting because I feel like part of the reason why you see like the tech industry coming out of San Francisco is that it doesn't, like the west part of the country doesn't have the sort of same cultural anchors that the east part of the country has. And that's just like, you know, because of the historical, like the recent quote unquote civilization, basically like white people going out there. But, you know, forget about, you know, I mean, obviously the Indians were there first and like they have their own remarkable culture, but like in terms of like how we experience as a country, you know,
I was just going there as a joke, really.
Yeah,
so he was a classical coach. And your mom played
primarily
piano.
Broadway, but my mother listened to a lot of classical music and opera. And I didn't grow up with a television, so music was like my main exposure to culture. And then when I turned 10, I got turned on to pop radio, and that was it. So I kind of, you know, and that was like early 80s. So it was like around Michael Jackson, Thriller, and like right when electronic music was like really like coming through, right?
Yeah.
So I sort of have like an affinity for electronic music, but also like a very strong affinity for the very organic music.
So if I told a kid in Portland who's 10 years old that one day he'll work with Depeche Mode, you'd say I'll be lying, right? I mean, that's not even like it's not even a possibility.
You know, it's funny. Well, I feel like it's one of those things that you, at a certain age, like you sort of think anything's possible and you just don't think about it.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
That's
And
true.
when I moved to New York, it was like a month out of high school. And then a month after that, I got a job at a recording studio.
Ah,
And I
cool.
was at that studio for 2.5 years. And then I went to, because I was working with an engineer named Goho Toda a lot, who's a fantastic mix engineer, Japanese mix engineer. And he had been working a lot with Francois Kevorkian, who produced mixes for Depeche Mode and for Kraftwerk. So the work that I've done with Depeche Mode has been mostly through him and remixes, that kind of thing, and also through Mike Snow. But
I used to do this thing like when I was in New York, I basically supported myself playing cafes, restaurants, super small clubs. I'm talking about the first year or so. And a lot of it was either duos and trios and a lot of like vocalists accompaniment, like standards. But you would play at a bar or restaurant, it would be super noisy. And we're trying to play jazz. And when it got the noisiest, I would play that line from Enjoy the Silence, the famous guitar line. And everybody goes like, oh, nice. Everybody, all of a sudden, their ears kind of perk up. And it was always like, a running joke within my bands. We just, as soon as we really lose them, we'll just pull them in with the Depeche Mode thing. So
that's a nice subtle way to communicate, like, shut the hell up. We're trying to play here.
I'll give you something, but and you did you ever think about like picking up an instrument? It was always just like passion for music and finding a way to
I took piano lessons for 8 years, and I embarrassingly never got that good at it. For some reason, I just it just never really clicked with me. But listening to music, like, I was really into it. And it was really my sort of, outlet and connection.
I have to tell you that I think my strongest listening moments are from that age. I mean, there was just something about being a teenager where music, I remember going to school, listening to Coltrane and Love Supreme, closing my eyes on the bus. It was like a long bus ride. And I remember listening to Guns or Pearl Jam when that was like it was the culture. I mean, I remember what it felt like.
Yeah.
I remember listening to Pat Metheny and Miles Davis, West Montgomery. I remember being in the car with my dad listening to West Montgomery. And I remember listening to a lot of classical music at home. And just the emotional impact of being at that age, the role that music plays in your life, it's kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, it's huge. Well, it's interesting because I didn't go to school when I was 18, but when I turned 40, I decided to go back to college. But I went back. I studied, I majored in economics, and I didn't declare a minor, but I studied neurology and psychology.
I think that if you survived in New York in music until you're 40, you majored in economics as it is. I mean, we don't need the piece of paper. I think you're good.
Now, you know what it was? I went back to school because I felt like I've been in the studio cage for a little too long.
Yeah.
And also there were a lot of things that I felt like I just, I needed answers to. And this is also sort of at the end of the first decade of like the internet and piracy and the music business falling apart and nobody having answers about like what the solutions were. And so it was kind of, that happened. I also got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So I was like scared that something might happen to my ears, which fortunately my case has been very mild, but it was kind of a mixture of things that made me go back. And I went back just like, the other kids were like, why are you working so hard? And it was like, I am going to suck the life out of this place while I'm here.
Yeah.
But I bring that all up because there's an interesting.
Wait, so with neurology, do you still do surgeries or you're kind of back to?
Just on the crazy people.
Which
is everyone I know. No, but it's interesting because the prefrontal cortexes, which is where all your executive decision making happens, is sort of like in this general area doesn't fully formulate until you're like 26, 27. And I don't know what your experience was around that age, but I remember having like a real time sort of pushing myself to listen to new music, to expose myself to new things. Whereas like before that was always very much like an open book.
Well, actually, all my executive decisions are actually made in Philly at Rope-A-Dope, so I never developed that part. But
Nice.
I don't know about that, because I do think this. I've been trying to figure out how come when I was in New York, I don't know if it was being younger and at school and single, I had a lot more time to listen to music that's not necessarily, I think it was far more experimental, let's put it that way.
Mm.
And it seems like, and that might have to do with my executive decision making, but
Yeah.
but I wonder, I wonder, right? I mean, I would guess that my fiance would say that anything I listen to right now is far beyond experimental as it is. But I remember listening to a lot of like Georgian choirs and percussion from Bali, and but buying the CD and spending time with it. And I remember have you heard the composer John Adams?
I mean, I know who he
Sure,
is.
it's a
But I don't know.
namesake like you, kind of.
Yeah.
I see the relationship. So I got this one John Adams album of a symphony called Naive and Sentimental Music. And this is pretty unbelievable music. So I fell so madly in love with it, I went and bought like 14 other works by him. I mean, I don't think I would have done that today. I mean, there's something about being overloaded with information, and I kind of think I kind of remember being, I don't want to say more curious, but that's probably it.
Yeah,
And it's probably switched around the age that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Well, but it's interesting that you say that, because it's fascinating to me that we see this. I mean, obviously it's not massive, but this resurgence in vinyl. And it seems to me like a lot of people, like they want to be forced into like being told a narrative with music.
And you just opened a whole kind of worms, and being present. I mean,
Yeah.
I just got into vinyl big time 2 years ago. Do you buy vinyl as well?
I don't buy it, but that's
I don't need to know. I don't need to know how you get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
well, no, I stream it with the service called Qobuz, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm on actually on Tidal, which is the competition.
Yeah.
But so getting into vinyl, I found myself a lot more present. Like I go and I put the thing on and I sit and listen, and there's something about it and the artwork and the whole and I kind of see myself now that I'm getting, I try to upgrade the system all the time, get a decent CD player. I'm kind of seeing myself buying CDs again as well. I mean, and I still buy CDs from a lot of my peers. A lot of my peers that don't have vinyl, I buy the CD.
Yeah.
And I find myself a lot more present listening to the music.
There's two things that happen when you listen to higher resolution music. One thing is, the Sony did all this when they were pushing out that Super Audio CD. Remember that format that failed? So, but that format
it only failed because they couldn't reissue the entire catalog again. That's the only reason.
Yeah, but they and also the internet.
Yeah,
it was like, do I buy a new collection or do I just put it all in my pocket? So they did all this research on the, because Super Audio CD, the format's called DSD, Direct Stream Digital.
Yeah.
And the way that it samples is super high, like it's like 2.8 megahertz. So now they've got more extended versions. So it's like, way higher than CD. They did these studies where they put people in MRI machines, and they noticed that after a certain period of time, being exposed to this, what they were using was gamelan music, which is very rich in overtones. And they noticed parts of the brain that aren't normally associated with hearing also lighting up in the machine. So the parietal lobe, which is like a area that does like spatial recognition, the thalamus, which is the sort of network hub of your brain, and the midbrain, which is kind of like more motor skill oriented stuff. And there's and they don't know what the mode of conduction is, because your ears are supposed to sort of stop at 20 kilohertz. But so they think that it's probably a combination of like hair and bone conduction, which is quite interesting.
What do you mean by that?
Like, in other words, like the hair on your body is capable of picking up like these ultrasonic frequencies that are well above 20K.
I have to tell you that if there's something that music taught me, is to completely believe in all of those things. Anything that's tangible and written in a book would always be such a small summation of, I mean, it's like, I've seen people do things musically that are, that bend reality. So when you come and tell me that my bone, first of all, have you ever been to an amazing concert? You can feel it in your bones. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
We just spent 3-4 days in my studio here recording with the band I have here, and the volumes were, let's say they were loud for a jazz group, and I could you feel it. I mean, you feel it physically in the body that it's too loud. It's that simple.
Yeah. Well, and the other element of this is that they did studies in the 70s before the CD came out, like measuring temporal resolution, so the timing between your ears, right, and what you can actually detect. And what they found was people like doing, I don't know, some kind of 2-click detection. And they found that people could detect down to 7 nanoseconds, which sounds ridiculous. But CD at 44.1 kilohertz can only get down to 22. And one of the things that I've noticed with DSD and Super Audio CD, which gets well below that resolution, is like the image of the audio is much clearer. Like if you listen to Michael Jackson Thriller on Super Audio CD, like those finger snaps, they sound like they're right there.
Well, I think the speed of sound, or the speed of sound detection, could be very vividly felt between vinyl and digital, or vinyl and CD, or the quality of, I mean, you can feel that it's faster somehow.
Yeah. And I think also it's like, as a musician, that when you're present with other people, like there is an aura that you get that's like very, special in that environment, right? As opposed to like doing everything as overdubs, right? It's like, that's fine. Like you can abstract and like get it just perfect, but like the magic of a performance with a group of people is just like, if you nail it, it's like you nail it.
This is kind of going, I could go online on this. The idea being, and I understand I'm in the minority here. The idea of sending tracks to people, which I am doing nowadays with COVID. And doing some projects like that. It kind of feels like, especially playing jazz, it kind of feels like food from 3 days ago, the finished thing. I mean, it doesn't have that. And I'm not even talking about the sonics of playing in the same room. I mean, you want, or I want, the room to be large enough and the sound to bounce in a way, in as many ways. I mean, all those Miles Davis, actually, it's not just Miles Davis. All of those albums recorded on 30th Street, all of the Sony ones, Glenn Gould, Mingus, Bob Dylan, and a lot of Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, they all recorded in the same group and in the same room. And I've been kind of studying those recordings, why this one sound like this. And then one day I got to visit the room. And it's just a huge room. I mean, it's huge. And you realize that it made Dylan sound a certain way because he would be just a guy with an acoustic guitar in that room. And then it would be make the Miles's drums sound a certain way because they had a lot of, you play something and the energy can bounce where it likes. So especially when I can't believe I'm talking about this and not you, but when you play a gig and you're on stage, or if I play with the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra or something, I remember the first time I was playing with the orchestra, I felt like I was in the middle of a Disney movie because all the overtones are like dancing around you and they're clashing one against the other. I mean, it's sound waves, they clash.
Yeah, sure.
And that's a physical sensation.
Yeah.
And that's very, very, very special. And it doesn't really get, you don't really get when you go to a concert and whatever you hear through the PA is not really it. So, so that I think if we're trying to get a certain feel to something, the idea of not playing live is very foreign to me. I mean, imagine we're asking Michael Jackson to sing and we put all of his vocal cords on different tracks in different booths. I mean,
there's a whole thing I'm about to go down. And well, I'll try to figure out how to thread this needle in a way, because I've been very much down this road for a while. So I've been always very much an early adopter of technology. So I was mixing in Pro Tools in the box in 1998 when, all my mentors are like, I can't mix that way. What are you, crazy? And now that's how everyone works, right?
Yeah.
And I was very early to using Auto-Tune and Beat Detective, and realizing that when I was tuning everything perfectly and Beat Detectiving everything like perfectly, like the soul was gone.
Yeah.
And so I've become very allergic to using those tools unless it's like there's special circumstances. I did a session with this was sort of after I'd sort of reached his conclusion but primarily like tuning because like everyone was like, you got to tune. I did a session with Isaac Hayes, and this is about a year and a half before he died, which obviously was like amazing. But he went into the vocal booth and, did some, it was like a duet for an artist. I'm not sure if it even came out. But he, some of the notes were like pretty pitchy, even by my standards. And I'm like, okay with pitchiness. And he came in and he was like, how was it? I was like, it's great, Isaac, but there's a couple of things maybe I could like nudge up, And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, let's listen to the song and I'll just, point out a couple of spots. And if you want me to fix them, I'll fix them. So we listened down to the song, we get to the end and I turn around and I'm like, what do you think? And he says to me, the notes in between the notes is where the grease is. You don't fix that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't cry in pitch. We don't get happy in pitch. Like the music, it's like, it's gotta like live in between. Like the notes are like, they're fence posts, right? They're not like where we're supposed to be necessarily.
I'll tell you a similar story. It's going to bore the shit out of you, but I'll go anyways. I've been playing this brand of guitars for 10 years or something, 10, 15 years, and they're perfect. Everything about it is perfect. It's the best guitar on the planet. And I thought there's nothing that could ever come close. And then I was in the studio and a friend had a couple of old Gibson guitars. And they're far from perfect.
Yeah.
And I'm playing that. And my body is filled with this sensation, a physical sensation that this is what I've been missing, the juice, the grease. And I think to play a Gibson guitar, and now I'm like a huge Gibson guy. I just found I'm part of the Gibson family and I play the new guitars, and I just found the one from 1953 in Hawaii, and I'm trying to restore it. It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is that the distance between the way they divide a string length is completely non-metric. I mean, you cannot, it doesn't measure in any scientific way. But we heard, all the albums that we know and love are recorded with that sound. So I play it, and it's like, that's the Wes Montgomery sound, that's the Pat Metheny sound, the Slash sound, the Jimmy Page sound, the Bob Marley sound. I mean, it's like a never-ending thing. So, and if you sit with it with a tuner, it's an extra in frustration.
Yeah. But it's this thing. It's like, I think it's a holistic thing in the sense that it's like when it's man crafted and, all those imperfections, it's like, the quote for this attribution is probably wrong, but it's where I think it comes from, which is from Jerry Garcia, that style are the mistakes that you can't help but make.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said.
And I think that, it's, have you ever used Artie Smith for instruments, for like instrument rentals? You know who he is?
Yeah.
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 So he has like these incredible guitars from like, the 20s. And like acoustic, like Gibson guitars from the 20s and stuff. And they just sound incredible. And I think some of it's obviously like the handcrafting that went into it. Some of it is like the age of the wood that obviously like has a certain kind of resonance that becomes richer.
So actually, I could go all night. Up until a certain time, the lacquer and the glue now that lacquer is actually illegal, and the glue was made from, it was like animal glue, like a mixture of fish oil and God knows what, and it turns out that lacquer and that oil, they crystallize when they harden. I mean, I could go all day, but and also the wood, you cannot get the wood like that anymore because now they cut it when it's too young. But the truth is, what I really believe is that when someone is scrapping a piece of wood, their energy is transferred into the wood. You really cannot convince me otherwise. Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as someone walking into the room and you feel good for it, or the other way around, and we bring that energy with us, and people hug trees, and people touch the animals, and the animals morph in different ways, and we do that to any living organism, wood included. So I think a lot of it is that.
Yeah,
I really, really, really believe that a lot of it is that when something is made with love and with care, or with hope, or with dreams, or with difficulties, we bring all of that into it. So I think a lot of it is it.
Yeah.
But so let's skip all the regular questions that we've been asking all the other producers and throw it out the window. What's the meaning of great music for you? I mean, how do we make if we take all those sessions, legendary sessions that you've been a part of, what's the common denominator? Dominator, whatever you say that in English.
Well, I think it kind of falls
in order for me,
yeah, go on. Sorry.
In order for me to be in a room and you being in order for you to get goosebumps after all those years, what needs to happen?
Well, there are a couple things. As an engineer, you have to know how to make the technology transparent to the performer. Like that's if nobody notices your job, you did it really well, which can be kind of frustrating because sometimes people don't realize like what you're doing until they go work in another situation. But a lot of that is
another thing about that, and that's very, very prevalent in acoustic music, is there are a lot of people who don't know how to get the subtleties of someone's greatness, transcend the technology. Meaning, there are a lot of people that sound unbelievable on stage, and you don't always get that on the CD. And I think when you're one of those guys, it could be like an acoustic session, or it could be the Killers that can get that kind of jump out of the out at you as a listener.
Well, I think that it's, you have to remember the conversation we were having like before you came on, but was about artificial intelligence and composing. And since I got out of school, I've, sort of made contact with venture capital firms, and a couple of them like consulted with me about investing in artificial intelligence for music composition. To which my reply has been, well, why? I mean, is this a problem that needs to be solved, right? But
have you not been enjoying our music as of late?
Right. But B, what I've said to these companies, and I say to people who are not very familiar with music, is that music is a representation, it's a narrative of relationships, right? It's your relationship as a musician with your instrument, and how you express yourself through that instrument, and all the experiences that go into that expression. And then that relationship with the other people that you play with, and then that collective relationship with an audience. And everyone, I mean, part of the reason why the music thing is so powerful is that no matter who you are in that equation, like what you take from it is something that's like more powerful than anything that you can get by yourself. And I think a part of the reason, like, we were talking about working remotely, part of the reason why that doesn't work so great is because you don't have that conversation happening, right? So I think, I've worked on, many different styles of music. I think that, my sense of like more electronic music is a little bit more of like an architectural point of view, in terms of like the story that you're telling and how you're constructing it. But like when you're working with much more organic music, it's really about the communal aspect and that conversational thing that's happening.
Absolutely. And it could also be like, I'll give you an example. I think this Sunday, we're already in the studio for 4 days. Everybody's exhausted. And I'm doing take, I don't know how long of something. I mean, it was probably, I don't know, take 9. Everybody's looking at me like, what's wrong with you, man? And everybody wants to go home, and they have, a couple of them have children and they want to hang out. You know what I mean? It's a Sunday after all.
Yeah.
And that feeling in the room when you're already been pushing them too far, and they want to go home, and they start not sounding at their best, and you still trying to get something from them. And I'm thinking to myself, what do I say now to get them excited again? I mean, about this song after God knows, and this moment can tip in any direction. It could go completely sideways, or it could create magic. Now, how you're never going to have those moments when you're working remotely with infinite takes of Pro Tools until you're blue in the face. I mean, I'm assuming that it's like those songs on XL on Main Street where they say it was just kind of the chemistry of the people they were fighting. There was like a gun on the amp or something. That's what. I mean, I don't know. I think what I'm afraid of, as far as COVID is concerned, is that the technology companies will be, they will be so far up into our lives to a point of no return after this, where we're going to lose so much more than we gain, because we're animals. I mean, we have that give another example. My cousin, who's like my little brother, he says that if you hit on a woman now in a physical way, she thinks you're a freak. I mean, it's all dating apps.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like too weird to go and speak to a girl and say, listen, I think there's something about you. So we're losing so much. And
I wonder though if there's some things that change and there's some things that stay the same. And, there's an element of, there's certain things that are timeless, right? It's like certain things go through trends. It's like, when I went back to school, I was always asking kids like what they were listening to, just out of curiosity, and a lot of them were like, oh, I don't listen to modern music. I listen to music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I'd be like, you don't have to tell me that because I'm old. Like, come on, what are you really listening to? And they'd be like, no, I'm serious. And this happened not just like anecdotally once or twice. I mean, I should have put a survey together and asked, because it was so common that I get this response. And I think that it's with all this music sort of being, I don't want to use the word cookie cutter, but like so manufactured in a sense that, people do miss that thing that we were talking about in terms of like the hyper frequencies and that sort of like immediacy of the music and the handcrafting that goes into the instrument and the immediacy of the human beings. I'll just finish off a story with a very funny
I love it.
Which is they did this study I think it was in Arizona, and they were doing it on pheromones. And the experiment, they did 2 control groups of strippers. And one set of strippers they put on birth control, and the other they didn't. And the ones that didn't go on birth control, their tips would spike right before they went into ovulation.
Unbelievable.
So, we're communicating in ways that we're not always conscious of. And I think that, I think you're right to be like slightly worried about the distancing, but I also think that when we get back together, it's going to be actually like a real special moment. I hope so.
I'm counting on you being right. But I'll give you another example. We're really into animals at our house. So in nature, birds know that a storm is coming 3 to 4 days before the storm is coming. And they know immediately if they're going to mate or not mate. And there's just so much of it that, there's so much of how we communicate that we are, that we're not conscious of. And let's just say that there's something about jazz that teaches me a lot about it, because it's all in the heat of the moment. Bass player is playing something and I immediately change the course of what I'm doing, and he's playing, and you kind of have to react, and you have to and there's a lot of chemistry that goes into it. There are some people that I love listening to, but when I play with them, it doesn't mesh for whatever reason. My beat and their beat, they're just not meant to be. But I love them and I think they're amazing, and I kind of wish it would work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. You cannot fake it. I can
also,
fake it.
I think it's, when I was looking up your music, because I couldn't find it on my streaming, I just found performances that you've done on YouTube. And the first thing that struck me was like how expressive you are. You're not just playing the guitar. It's like, it's a full body experience that like you're pushing through that instrument. And I think that that's something, it's like, you don't get that with like electronic music, right? That's something that has to be like organic from like what's happening in here, down through the nerves, through the fingers, like how you're feeling the pressure, like, and there's like a instinctual is the wrong word, but
I'm going to tell you something that I don't think I almost didn't tell anyone ever. I went through an accident 5 years ago, motorcycle accident. And to make a long story short, I broke my shoulder, my hand, my fingers were cut off and put back in place, no less. That's why I don't tell people. So I'm trying to learn to play again. And this is after I already done TED Talks on playing Bach and, on guitar and blah, blah, blah. So I'm trying to learn to play again, and none of the nerves are really attached yet, or they're not awake or alive yet. And I've learned that if I'm practicing scales like I used to do all the time, my body's just not reacting at all. But if I play what I hear, it's reacting. The hands find a way. if you really listen to what you really hear in your mind or your inner ear or your inner soul or wherever you, like my hands would find a way. And it's a little better now, but it's kind of still like that. If I'm trying to play anything that's technical that I'm thinking about, then the hands are not really playing along as they used to before. But anything that comes from the soul, my body finds a way of letting that out, come out of the guitar. You know, with words and all, but
well, you know, the brain is a remarkable organ, because it's what they refer to as the neuroplasticity, which you probably are familiar with that term after this accident, right? Which is that it will repair, you know, damage that's been done. If there's, you know, if the brain says, oh, I need to relearn how to do this, it will like migrate nerves to like, you know, fix things. Not in every situation, but in many situations. my situation with MS is a similar example, where there are certain nerves that are being like chewed away by white blood cells, but by exercising and by like exercising your mind, like you can rework some of these connections. So things that you might think, you know, you might lose if you reinforce those highways, those neural highways, like you strengthen them, right? I mean, it's like exercising, right? It's like you exercise muscles, they get stronger, and your nerves work the same way. And completely. You know, so I don't remember how we got on this, but
so I have a technical question. I'm looking at your monitors that you mix with, and I look at my monitors as well. Yours have a Grammy on them. How do I get the Grammy on mine?
You have to be lucky.
I mean, which monitor are you using that gets the Grammy on it?
Yeah, you have to be lucky, I think. And I think, well, you know, I worked with Mark Ronson for maybe 5 years before we did the Winehouse record. And I guess at that point I'd done the Jason Mraz record as well. It was somewhere mixed in there. You know, the things that we were talking about in terms of like auto-tune and time, the beat detective and stuff, like I learned a lot of lessons. And I think that there's that, you know, that old saying that luck is where opportunity and preparedness come together. You know, I think a lot of things came together in that Winehouse record, because, you know, Mark's not the most communicative person, but he's got a very strong sense of like what he likes and what he doesn't like. And when we did the Winehouse record, we you know, he played me her vocals, and then he was like, I'm thinking about using this band. And we sort of played around with the idea of like, well, maybe we should get, because they weren't really like session musicians, like the sort of.
You brought in Chris Dave, or was your idea?
Well, no, it was he wanted to use them. And I sort of, you know, I sort of momentarily objected, because it was like kind of like a little bit scrappy. And but he was really insistent on wanting to use them. And I knew that whatever that they did, I mean, I understood the energy. Like I know that Mark could hear the energy that was like a youthful energy that they had, and like a cohesive energy that they had, the Dap Kings had from playing together. And so, you know, because I knew I'd spent so much time like sort of making mistakes with Beat Detective, I knew like whatever they play, like if it sounds like a little bit scrappy, like I can make it work. And particularly like, I think even now, so everyone's so reliant on everything being on a grid. And what I ended up doing with her record is, I think we cut the songs we did in maybe 3 days. And then I spent like the next 10 days, like going through the performances, but nothing's on a grid. So anything that's been fixed has been like feel that's been abstracted from their playing and then moved into other parts, so that it sounds like the whole thing sounds like cohesive, like it would be like great, you know, really tried and true session players, but without it being sounded like, you can't put that record into Pro Tools and like line it up to a grid. It just doesn't, because it's their playing.
Yeah.
And I just made it a little bit more cohesive. But I think that it was very I had learned the lesson already at that point, that it was like, if you abstract that humanity from the music, it's going to fall flat. And so, and I didn't, it was a few years later, I worked with them and they were like, did you do anything? And I was like, yeah, man, a little bit here and there.
You really want to know.
Yeah.
So last questions, because I can go on all day and all night.
Yeah.
Now that you look back at it, what is it about her voice do you think started this phenomenon? Like, what is it? What's the qualities that you hear there that you say, this is it?
Well, there is a magic in that woman's voice. I mean, I don't know what that is, but I can tell you that when we did is it Wake Up Alone? I mean, all those songs, I don't think we did more than 5 takes, because each one was like, oh, that was amazing, And it was just like, we did more takes because it was like, well, we've got her here, like, let's see what else happens. Most of those performances are pretty much the take, with a couple of like odds and ends here popped in. The pain that was like came through on Wake Up Alone, I think we did like 5 takes, and I was just kind of like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Like, I think, and I'm like, look over to Mark, and I'm like, I think we got it. Like, more almost like, can we stop doing this? Because I can't take this anymore. And he was like, yeah, I think we got it, But I think she was like such a master of her skills that there was no filter between what was up here and what came out of here. It was just like, and I don't know if that's because, she had been practicing since being a little girl, or I don't know what that was, but it certainly was like that pathway between what's going on up here and what comes out of here was like very short, so, and we didn't do, like I said, we didn't need to do multiple takes on many of these songs. They were like, she'd go in there and just do it, and you'd be like, and some of the background chords, like you'd think, the intervals were like, oh, that's wrong. And then she'd fill out like 2 more notes, and you'd be like, oh, okay. Like, it was all up here for her, it was all up here. And the only people that I've worked with like that before, like I worked with Carole King on like some movie demos, and she was capable of doing that. And a couple of other like older artists who've been around for a long time, but no one who's that young. And when we did the record, I asked Mark, I was like, how old is she? He's like, oh, she's 21. And I was like, yeah, she's 21, sure. Like it was, that magic came from wherever that was, that aura just like came out. That I haven't, that is a rare artist. And when we did that record, I was sure it wasn't going to be successful. I was like, this is amazing, but nobody's going to buy it. And it was like a massive record. But you know how these things are. It's like, you never know. It's like, record company can be like fully behind a record and everyone's saying something's great. And like, you think that it's good, and then it just flops. And then some things like, I mean, her record, it was like, I know this is amazing. Like, it wasn't, I just didn't think the audience were there for it, because at the time, like the climate of music was just not that, And so I just, I was skeptical that it was going to do anything, but I was like, I know this is going to be a record that I'm going to be proud of. And if people are like, oh, what are your favorite records that you worked on? Regardless of how successful it might have been, I would have been like, oh, you got to check out this Amy Winehouse record. It's like really amazing. So,
that's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah. It's that feeling in the moment that you were talking about when you're playing with people. And like, sometimes like the chemistry isn't there, and sometimes it really is, I don't know. I mean, what is do you have any feeling about like what makes like working with certain people? Because I feel like a lot of younger people, because they're all like trapped behind their laptops, in their closets, like making beats. Like when it comes to like working with other people, they're almost like afraid to.
I think that people have chemistry for better or for worse. And it doesn't have to be people you like. It doesn't have to be people you get along with. It doesn't they don't, you guys don't need to be friends. But I mean, I actually say this a lot. I went to see Guns N' Roses on a reunion tour. And it was nothing like I've ever seen in my life. I mean, really, it wasn't whatever you put those people together and atoms explode. God knows why.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to. I mean, I have a lot of friends that I love hanging out with, but for whatever, when we play, it's nice, or it's okay, or it's good, or whatever. And there are other people that I might not be the biggest fan of, but when we play, it's like, wow. Go figure. So,
Yeah.
and it's like, why?
Is there sort of any indication ahead of time that you get a sense of like what might work and what not? Or you just have to try it?
I think yes. I think yes. I think there's a lot of tendencies. I think there are people that choose, like, I don't imagine Miles Davis choosing a guy I work with, and that's not going to work. He's going to hear something that is going to work for what he's doing, really. And with me, I don't know it's what it is, because my dad was the principal percussionist for Philharmonic for like 40 years. So rhythm is a big thing in our house.
Yeah.
But it's where we put the time field. I think that it will make people, and I think it's kind of like the same. I mean, I was late to sound check today because of daylight savings, so I didn't really get to speak to you until we kind of went on.
Yeah.
Kind of like there's no way to rehearse this. I mean, you know, I have a list of questions here that we didn't get to. So I feel like the same with musicians. I mean, someone makes you feel, you listen to them, and it makes you go a little like, this is something I connect with.
Or is that makes you feel like you want to know more, kind of thing?
I think it kind of turns you on, and I think it's almost always about where they place their beat, which is very, very special, because I don't know, I'm sure you know this, but it's not gets talked about a lot. I can make someone think that my guitar tone is bright or dark depending on where I place my beat. I swear to God.
Yeah.
And I can make, like, it creates that illusion, and they think you've turned a knob that makes it brighter, or I can create an illusion that there's overdrive, or depends on how you clash the notes. I mean, it's such a physical phenomenon music is. I mean, at the end of the day, someone is doing something that creates sound, and it hits our eardrums. And I think I'm thinking about this a lot, because our entire industry was kind of thrown to the wolves. And I'm thinking about the meaning of music a lot.
Yeah.
And I've learned that in the caves, when we just learn how to walk on two legs, they would find tools to eat with, very basic tools to eat with, tools to hunt with, and tools to make music. I mean, it goes that far back in our DNA as animals. So
your ears also, but your ears are also like the most sort of alert organs, right? In terms of like proximity and distance, like your ears hear everything around you. And the time distance between like what hits your eardrum and what goes into your ear is about 3 milliseconds. You being able to recognize like what's going on. Whereas your eyes, it's like an 80 to 160 millisecond like delay before like the whole thing fills in.
you know about this system of teaching blind people to navigate through clicks? You heard about this?
No.
So there's a whole new system of teaching blind people to navigate using the same method that bats use. So
Ah,
they do those little clicks with their mouth, and they listen to the bounce of the wall of the click, and that's how
yeah.
they navigate when they fly. So they've been teaching blind people to do that, and to make clicking sounds and listen to the way they bounce back and determine where they are within a space.
Mm.
And if you look at the videos, it blows your mind, because you see that it gives blind people this unbelievable freedom that was never there, because now they can navigate. It's kind of unbelievable, and they can feel their way within space just based on sound. How incredible is that?
That's amazing. You have to send me videos.
And I will. So Vaughn, can I steal you for another episode on season 2 next year? Because there's a
Sure.
lot of musical things. I mean, musical mixing, how loud, how soft, which monitors, how do you check how this size from the cone, different, where you place it, how much time you spend on this, how long is too long to spend on a take. It's never ending.
Well, this is there are no correct answers anyway. It's just, a lot of times, I mean, there are things. I'll give you a quick story from working on Mark's first record. He always had, guests coming through the studio, and one day one of his friends came through the studio. She'd never been in a studio before, or his friend's mother came through with his friend. She'd never been in a studio before, and she looked around at all the equipment and she was like, "Oh, I get it. This is just like cooking." I mean, that's it. It's like, what's the right way to cook? So many of these things are aesthetic decisions. It's like you choose equipment based on the flavor that you want to impart on the record. What is it that you're trying to communicate? And I mean, everyone is sort of an engineer these days if you've got a laptop and a microphone and you can hit record. But I think of people who are the really great engineers, know a catalog, or they have a reserve of microphones, and each one has a personality, much like a guitar might be, or any instrument, right? And so you start to, a vocalist walks into the room, you hear their voice, you're like, okay, I know what to do. What early days, a lot of times, I mean, I'll still do it sometimes, where it's you put up multiple microphones because you're not sure, given the music that's there, how it might fit within the bed. But, there are all these things that are start to become intuitive. And I think that, as anything, it's in the early days of any kind of, whether you're engineering or you're playing or you're producing, there's an exploratory period of time. And then there's and this is for all creativity, by the way, there's an exploratory period of time where you're just trying different things, and most things don't work, right? And when you find something that sort of works, you start developing patterns around that. And as you develop patterns around that, then you build expertise. And then once you build expertise to a certain level, then you can really communicate through that. But at some point, you're going to get tired of doing that, and you're going to have to go back through that cycle.
Completely. And especially for the artists, I mean, many people create this unbelievable sound and style, and then they kind of get trapped into that style, and it loses.
But you can become scared, right? It's it's very hard to build a successful career. So if you built it in a particular kind of way to go explore off the beaten path from your audience, it's you're taking a risk. Are they going to follow you, or are they going to be like, what the hell are you doing?
Or they're going to go, this is incredible, this is so much more exciting, I can't believe
Absolutely.
this.
Right. I mean, Radiohead is a great example of that, right? Where it's like
the band, you mean?
yeah,
I'm
just the
joking.
twisting.
It's like it's like the,
Yeah, but just the twisting and turning, and it's like once you've built trust with an audience, they'll follow you.
what the leap that they've made between OK Computer to Kid A is it's historic. I mean, really, it's like it's unbelievable for an artist for a group of people to make that leap of consciousness. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
really,
think even from the Bends to OK Computer.
of course, you're right.
You know?
Of course, you're right. But it's kind of like when we were. It's kind of like there's a similarity to the Joshua Tree and Achtung Baby. I mean, it's just like this is an acoustic trio with some delays. I mean, not to belittle that's a masterpiece, but and then it's like a circus on a run or something. I mean, it's really kind of unbelievable when people do something that it's hugely successful, and then find a way to reinvent themselves. I think that's almost always that's kind of an historic feat in my eyes.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's interesting is sort of the macro view, and to me, like in a lot of ways, what constitutes pop music now feels to me a bit like the end of the 80s with all the pop metal. And some of that was good, but a lot of it was like,
What's up with the hairdos? I mean, I mean,
but then Soundgarden came around and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and just blew it all out of the water. And I feel like we're kind of like in that kind of territory at the moment.
I'm really hoping you're right because I grew up on that generation, and I mean, I was like 13 or 14 or something like that, and it's kind of like listen back to it now. The first two Nirvana albums, they sound like avant-garde music almost. It's just so raw, and it's like, how did it something like this become popular? Or the first Pearl Jam album is it's not an easy listening album. Not the subjects, not the lyrics. So I'm a little, it's kind of unbelievable that went, yeah, the way it did. It's let's say that I'm really hopeful because it seems like I'm really hopeful that what you're saying is true because it seems like now with social media and I mean everybody's rawness seems to be a way of the past and getting more traction on TikTok seems to be.
Yeah. Well, I think we're sort of like going through this period of time where we're exercising all these like technical possibilities that don't really have anything to do with the creation side of things. It's more like kind of the networking of the world. And I think that it's kind of fascinating that, I mean, you grew up in Israel, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the fact that you're drawn to jazz music and like you're so good at it, which I think of as being just such an American kind of thing. And this artist Rumor?
Who?
Country?
Yeah.
Country. Yeah. I mean, the first time I heard her, I was like, this is incredible American country music. So come to find out she's a British singer.
Yeah.
And I think it's really actually fascinating, like you being an example of like someone coming from a place that you wouldn't expect and like this sort of new infusion.
Merrick, I completely disagree with you on so many levels, and I'm not being modest or humble. There is a way, let's put it this way, everybody's talking about America this, America that, Trump administration this, blah, 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 blah. Go to any bar in the world.
Yeah.
In Thailand or in Dublin, or people are trying to play American music. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Take any battle of the bands with an American drummer and a drummer from anywhere else in the world. And that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
And with that being said, to play jazz on the highest level, I don't think I know anyone who's not American that has a deserving place there. To be honest, it's just it's such, and I don't think I'm not a big on on whatever nationalism. I think that's I mean, it's 2020. Are we still really talking about these kind of divides? But
no, I mean it more in terms of like the thing that like got you, right? It's not so much that it belongs to this group of people or that group of people, or the necessarily the cauldron so much as it is that how a certain kind of music from a place that's like from a very different part of the world can reach across the planet and so deeply move people in all sorts of ways. And I think what's really interesting is it's like the mixing and matching, of experiences that we're hearing in music more and more. I mean, I think the major record labels are trying to push out a certain kind of thing, but like below that sort of top 40 surface level, like there's like a plethora. I mean, like the British jazz scene is another example of like people who are like taking this idea and like it's uniquely British jazz, but it's like a whole vibrant community of people who are like behind it. That's what I mean, more than it necessarily belonging to one group or another, because it's a universal language, right? We all speak it. That's the magic of it.
I disagree with you. I think culture has, I mean, with globalization, we lose so much. I mean, when I started touring the United States, it was already like every rest stop look like the rest of them. But there's, especially in Europe, there are a lot of pockets where they don't look like anywhere else in the world. They don't feel like anywhere else in the world. And I mean, we're in Berlin right now. We've been here for a year, and I kind of respect the guys that don't speak English, or they're, you know what I mean? The guys they're like, you're in Germany, you either hang or go home. I kind of respect that.
Yeah.
And I think that creates something. Now, how does that translate to music? That's a different story, because jazz is about spirit of the moment. It's about being very, very present and very adept at changing direction at any given time. And it's about a certain spirit. There's going to be a cry to it. I mean, any music that doesn't have the blues in it, I kind of lose interest. And I think all of those things got me. I mean, it was also, there's something greater than life to some of those artists. I mean, it could be Keith Jarrett, it could be John Coltrane, and it could be the Killers. Actually, I mean, that drummer alone is worth the price ticket, the ticket price. But so I mean, great musicians and bands, they have this greater than life thing to them. Yeah. I mean, you're watching people do magic, really. And
absolutely.
And I think that what got me. I think as a kid, I kind of sensed that these guys, as opposed to the rock guys or the pop guys, these guys can really do whatever they want. I mean, there's no chaperone on this. And I also got a sense that the greatness of some of those guys is it's kind of unbelievable. Like, I always feel that people in the music community bitch and moan because they're not successful enough, and because this is not enough, and this is not this, and this is not, they're not getting paid enough. And I think that's bullshit. I think the music you make is just not great enough. I mean, if the music that I made were beyond, then I would be playing to 20,000 people. It's kind of that simple. There's a real democracy to that.
Yeah, I think also there's something to be careful of, because I know what you're saying, but I also, in order for a audience to grow, there has to be like the intersection of what neurologists call like your space of possibilities, which is the culmination of your experience.
Wow. This could go in so many places. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Because let's do this. Let me send you a couple more dates.
Okay.
Because I have a lot of questions for you that we'll never get to tonight.
Okay.
And if I'm late for dinner, she's gonna kill me.
Okay. Yeah. I'll let you go.
Vaughan, this has been absolute joy. I mean, you just made my day. I
My
mean,
pleasure.
completely. I'm just so thankful. Thanks for coming on board. I'm inviting everyone to subscribe to the SHURE channel so next time we speak to you, and we're gonna have to do an episode 2 of this, that we get a lot of that we're gonna get a lot of the tips that we're
Okay.
gonna see for you for the next album.
We could do that.
Man, stay safe. I can't wait to see you in the real world when this is over.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thanks
so much for
for
having
coming.
me. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank
We'll
you.
speak soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.